Think of the ancient streets of Jerusalem, cobblestone pathways worn smooth by the passage of countless sandals and later modern footwear. The sunlight glints off the golden dome of the Temple Mount, casting a warm hue over the old city. But this vision is not one of tranquility. It's juxtaposed against the ear-splitting sound of sirens and the rising smoke of a city and region on the brink. You've probably heard of prophetic texts like the Book of Revelation, Daniel and Zechariah, filled with vivid imagery and poetic language about what some believe to be the end of days. These ancient words have often been applied to contemporary conflicts in the Middle East, especially those involving Israel. For example, Ezekiel 38 speaks of a coalition of nations coming against Israel, and Zechariah 14 describes Jerusalem being besieged. While it's a point of debate among theologians and scholars, the recent escalations in 2023 between Israel and Gaza have been considered by some as fitting into these eschatological frameworks. Picture this: it's a chilly January morning in Gaza. Amidst the labyrinthine streets echoing with the calls of vendors, children heading to school, and the day's first azan from the mosque, the Islamic Jihad finalizes its plans. With a resounding blast that ripples through the air, rockets ascend into the clear sky, arching towards Israeli territories. This was more than a hostile act. For some, it was seen as the ignition of a prophetic timeline. The Bible, in its poetic grandeur, doesn't shy away from describing such escalations. Isaiah 17. One speaks of the ruinous fate of Damascus, a close ally of the Palestinian territories, suggesting a domino effect that would disturb the peace of Israel. The atmosphere hangs heavy until May 9th, pregnant with anticipation. Israel, ever vigilant and aware of the significance of maintaining its sovereignty, especially in the light of biblical promises, responds. Under the code name Operation Shield and Arrow, a reference many find rooted in biblical texts like Psalm 18, 2. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. My God is my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. They carry out a series of airstrikes. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad movement finds itself at the receiving end of Israel's military precision. Each explosion on the ground mirrors the spiritual tremors resonating through the prophetic circles that see these events as aligning stars on the eschatological map. Now fix your eyes on October 7th, a day marked by biblical levels of violence. Imagine looking up and seeing that instead of the bright blue sky that you normally see in the fall in Israel, the sky was filled with the plumes from over 2,200 rockets. It looks like fire and brimstone from a bad story is falling from the sky. These rockets are part of an attack by Hamas, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and the Socialist Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. For this attack, they call it Operation Al-Aqsa Flood, after the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is a holy place in both Middle Eastern politics and prophecies. Some people believe that the mosque stands on the Temple Mount, which is where the end of the world will start. Israel is shocked but not broken, so they move quickly to launch a counteroffensive. Operation Swords of Iron is what they call it, which sounds like something from the Bible. Iron has always been a sign of strength and judgment in the holy text. Isaiah 2:4 talks about swords being beaten into plowshares, which this phrase makes me think of. But in this case, the swords are still swords, tools of war that have been changed by the need of the moment, and maybe even by fate for some. The things that happen are not separate incidents that happen in a vacuum. They repeat the words of prophets and scribes from long ago who wrote books that have both fascinated and confused people for hundreds of years. Nation shall rise against nation, Matthew 24:7, seems to be happening right in front of our eyes. The seriousness of these events, how they went from being an insult to a full-on attack, is like a small version of a much bigger, more cosmic story that has already been written, but is waiting to be fully played out. As a result, the year 2023 could be a sign, a build-up to a big event that people both look forward to and fear. Whether you see these events as just political games or as chess pieces moving on a board of prophecy, they have huge effects. In this way, the land between Israel and Gaza is not only a battleground for nations, but also a stage for a story that might last forever. Imagine the Al-Aqsa Mosque's large courtyard, with its minarets pointing up toward the sky as if to pray to God. People who believe in peace, comfort, and maybe even justice send up fervent prayers in this holy place. This is what Operation Al-Aqsa Flood, an attack named after a place of worship that millions of people love, is all about. But there is something more than politics going on. There is a spiritual side that can't be ignored. The mosque is built on the Temple Mount, which is a contested but holy area with eschatological weight. Some biblical scholars even use Psalm 83, which talks about nations working together against Israel, to say that this operation could very well be part of a bigger plan from God. Now look at the hallways of the Israeli Defense Headquarters. Overhead, lights cast a dim glow over tables where maps are spread out and officers are deep in conversation. The operation on the anvil in this case is just as important. The name of it, Operation Swords of Iron, sounds like something from the Bible. When iron is used in the Bible, it usually means unwavering strength or impending judgment. For example, in Nebuchadnezzar's dream in the book of Daniel, the statue's legs were made of iron, which meant that the kingdom would be strong, but also fragile. In the unsettling chaos of rockets blasting through the sky and people breaking into Israeli communities, it is impossible to miss the complex meanings. Kibbutzim, which are usually rural communities built on the idea of social equality, and cities like Sderot were targeted, and their rural innocence was broken. It's a lot like the story of the biblical Garden of Eden, which was a paradise that became tainted by war and conflict. Israel responds right away by declaring a state of emergency. This may be similar to the events in the book of Revelation, where disasters prepare the way for a new world order. This is where the harsh reality of geopolitics meets theology. The firefight that follows is not only end of the world in size and scope, but also in what it means. Something about it feels like a play on the scary phrase, "Nation shall rise against nation," which comes straight from Matthew 24:7. No matter if you think these events are signs from God or not, they have a special effect on people. The military operations, which have names that have spiritual meanings, are happening as if they were responding to a script that was written thousands of years ago by prophets who used quill and parchment to write the stories of nations that had not yet been born. This section, this fight between Operation Al-Aqsa Flood and Operation Swords of Iron, turns into a line in a much longer poem. This poem is written by the way that human will, divine intent, and the unstoppable march of history interact with each other. It's like the old prophets or storytellers in a story that people are still writing, even though the ink may have been dry for a long time. It's impossible to fully understand how things are getting worse between Israel and the Gaza Strip without thinking about what they might mean for the future. Before the end times, the book of Daniel talks about more and more wars, which will lead to a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation. Daniel 12:1. Recent events are similar to what was said in these words, but it's up to interpretation to decide if they mean that the prophecies are coming true. The year 2023 has been very hard for relations between Israel and Gaza. What began as small incidents turned into full-scale military operations on both sides, which destroyed lives and caused a lot of chaos. From a religious point of view, these events could be seen as fitting with old prophecies about the end of the world, or they could just be another conflict in an area that has a long history of them. In any case, the events are a stark reminder of how unstable politics are in the Holy Land, a place that has been the setting for both divine stories and very human conflicts for thousands of years. Let's not forget the message of hope that runs through the whole Bible, even when there is conflict and the unsettling sound of prophecies. People often quote the book of Revelation for its end-of-the-world visions, but it also makes a promise: a new heaven, a new earth, and a new Jerusalem. Isaiah mentions a time when they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Isaiah 2:14. Imagine a future where the deserts bloom like the rose of Sharon and the ancient cedars of Lebanon sway in a calm breeze. The Temple Mount would be a symbol of unity, not division, welcoming people from all over the world to worship in spirit and truth. Prophecies will come true, but the story of the Bible also promises the coming of an eternal king, a prince of peace, who will make everything right. As we move through these uncertain times and see things that seem to be pulsing with prophetic meaning, let us hold on to this hope. Those who are waiting for the Lord to come back should not be afraid of these shakings in the world. Instead, they should see them as the beginning of a new era where justice flows like a river and righteousness like a stream that never runs dry. Let that promise be the anchor for our souls, a steadfast hope in a world adrift, a light piercing through the darkest clouds of uncertainty. For he has said, "Surely I am coming soon," Revelation 22:20. And to that, the waiting world replies, "Amen."